welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I am thrilled, as always, that you are here. This week, I have a solo show on deck for you. So no guest, but I wanted to share with you a concept, an idea, or sort of a set of concepts that have been really helpful to me on my parenting journey and in the coaching work that I do, and that I thought might be really helpful for you as we, wrap up January here and head into February, which is the month of, for many people, the month of love. We've got Chinese New Year, so we've got a renewal, we've got Valentine's Day, and it's a time to kind of think about how are we connecting with one another. We're a month into the new year. My guess is that for many of you, if you set resolutions, if that's your jam, it's not my jam, but if it's yours, let's be honest, many of those have probably fallen by the wayside. And so I find that this time of year, as we move from January into February, it can be a great time to sort of take stock of where did we think we wanted to go at the beginning of the year? What were the ideas and ambitions, and how are we doing with those things? And if you set any sort of intentions or thoughts for your parenting journey in 2024, this is a great time to check in on that as well. And my hope is that what I'm going to share with you today will be supportive one way or the other. So what I'm going to share with you are the 4 S's. The 4 S's come from the work of Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. And Dr. Siegel and Dr. Bryson have written a number of different books together that are all of which are fabulous. But this is a book called The Power of Showing Up. This book was published in 2020, so it's been out for about 4 years at this point. And when I read it, it really summarized and sort of put some of the concepts that I use in coaching, that we talk about in positive discipline, into, for me, a really easy sort of package to remember, if you will. And it is the idea, as I already mentioned, of the 4 S's. So I want to talk a little bit about what the background for this is, and then I'll tell you what those 4 S's are. But what Dr. Siegel and Dr. Bryson have said, and they're not unique in this regard, but many parents come to me and say, I want my children to be successful. I want to be a good parent. What is the single most important thing that I can do for my kids? What is the single best thing that I could do to support them and to support my parenting journey? And a lot of times parents expect that answer to be something related directly to their children. You will give them chores, or you will, sign them up for all the sports. You will get them tutors. You could come up with any number of answers for things that we could do as parents to support our children. But it turns out that the number one thing that we can all do, the number one best thing that we can do to support our children in living happy, fulfilling, rich lives is to deal with ourselves, right? Parenting is actually not about our kids. It's about us. And it's about showing up for our kids in the best way that we can. And that's not always an easy thing to do, right? Even for those of us who work in the parenting space, I coach parents all day long. And sometimes it is difficult to show up as the parent that I want to. If you can relate to that, then this is for you. But when we can manage our own stuff, when we can deal with our feelings, when we can manage our own baggage, if you will, and we can show up in a way that is really meaningful and powerful for our kids, a la the 4 S's that we're about to talk about, what we do is we create securely attached kids. Now, some of you may have heard of attachment parenting, and there's all these sort of buzz phrases or buzzwords out there. And this really is about, what does attachment really mean and what does it really do for our kids? So when we have securely attached kids, they have a higher self-esteem, they tend to have better emotional regulation, they perform better academically, they have better coping in times of stress, right? They have lower cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. With young kiddos, if you've got a preschooler, we see better engagement with preschool peers. In middle childhood, we see better friendships. We see in adolescence, we see more effective social interactions. These kiddos tend to be happier and have better relationships with us, right? With the people raising them. They have stronger leadership qualities, a greater sense of self-agency. They tend to be more trusting and non-hostile in their romantic relationships in adulthood. They demonstrate more empathy, a greater overall social competence, and a greater trust in life as a whole. I don't know too many parents that would look at that list or hear that list of things and say, yeah, I don't want that for my kid, right? I think most of us would say, I wholeheartedly want that for my child or want those things for my child. And so what can I do to get it? And that's where we circle back to, it comes down to us. It's all about us managing our stuff, our baggage, our learning, doing, growing. Most importantly, of course, showing up for our kids. When we remember to deal with our own shit first, it really puts us in the driver's seat of how our journey as parents go. It doesn't mean that we control everything that happens with our kids, but it means we can feel better about the decisions that we make, the ways that we interact, the things that we do with our children. And it is so important to remember that just because you have a history of, let's say, chaotic household, or a parent who yelled at you a lot, or a parent who did not, do the things that allowed you to be securely attached as a child. History does not equal destiny. We all have the ability to grow, to learn, to be intentional, and to make decisions that benefit our kids. And that is where the 4 S's come in. So what are the 4 S's? They are safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And what Dr. Siegel and Dr. Bryson say is that if every child has at least one adult in their lives that shows up in such a way that helps that child feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure, that's how we form secure attachment. And that's how we get successful preschoolers, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and all the way through to adulthood. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes today in this episode diving into each of those 4 things and talking about what they mean and how we do them. Now, I want to mention these are not concepts that I invented, that I created. This really does come from the work of Dr. Siegel and Dr. Bryson. I want to give them full credit for this brilliant work and this brilliant approach to this. And I simply offer these ideas to you in the hopes that 1, they are helpful. 2, they sort of maybe open your mind to some ways that we can interact with our children better. And 3, to encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. In the show notes, I'll have a link, obviously, to this book, The Power of Showing Up. I highly recommend it. I think it's great. And if you need help implementing some of these things, of course, that's what I'm here for in terms of providing coaching support, support through the academy, and classes that I teach. So let's start with safe. Let's talk about safe. You all know that I love to talk about safety. I'm a big fan of promoting brain and body safety in kids. And really, when we boil down safe, seen, soothed, and secure, we can wrap that all up, and it is summarized by brain and body safe kiddos. But there's, obviously a little bit more to that. And so let's talk about safety. Now, as I do that, as we talk about the 4 S's, I want to remind everyone here that this isn't about perfection. I mean, let's be real honest here. I am not a perfect parent. You are not a perfect parent. And I do not expect you to be a perfect parent or to try to aim for perfection. It's not good. It wouldn't actually be good for your kids. There is no such thing. We are all going to screw up. We're all going to make mistakes. And that's okay. As long as, again, we go back to there's space to learn, to grow, and to keep figuring out intentionally how we want to show up as parents. All right, so let's talk safety. Safety is the opposite of threat, right? It means that our children are protected and sheltered from harm. That seems fairly obvious, right? If you see your child running out into the street, you're going to stop them, you're going to pull them back onto the sidewalk, and you're going to protect them. And that is certainly one of the primary jobs of parents. But safety really goes deeper than that, because we all have our physical safety. We also have our emotional safety. So the idea of safety starts with, do you have food, water, shelter? Are you, being prevented from climbing the bookshelf and having it fall on you? Are you being prevented from running into the street or running out in front of a car? Are your parents keeping you as safe as possible from child sexual abuse? All those kinds of things that we would put in the category of body safety. But then there's also, as I mentioned, that emotional safety. What the authors of this book say is that we really have two main jobs when it comes to our kids. First, as I already mentioned, protect them from harm. The second is to avoid being the source of fear and threat. And what that means is it really shows up in three different ways. When we are yelling at our kids, when we are exposing them to scary parental conflict, or when we are introducing them to inappropriate ideas and images, things that are not age appropriate, developmentally appropriate. When we do those things, if we yell a lot at our kids, and look, I know we're all going to yell sometimes, but if yelling is your primary form of discipline or communication, or both, that might be a time to deal with your own shit, right? Deal with your shit and don't take it out on your kids. When we yell at our kids a lot, when we are yelling with other adults in the home or having, scary conflict, like that rises to the level of domestic violence, or when we introduce them to inappropriate ideas and images, scary movies, pornographic things, right? Discussing ideas and images that they're not ready for, that's when we then become the source of the threat and we don't show up and create safety for our kids. So to make sure that we are a source of safety, we need to commit to doing no harm, right? We need to commit to doing no harm. We need to commit to not being the source of any fear for our kids. Number two, when we screw up, we got to make repairs. We got to take responsibility. We got to say we're sorry. We got to own our own fuck ups and say, yep, that wasn't good. I'm really sorry. Here's what I'm doing to make it better. And we need to work really hard to be the place or the person that they come when they are scared, when they need support, when they need something, right? I want to share a little story from my own life about this. So as you know, if you listen to the podcast at all, I have a 6-year-old right now, rapidly heading towards 7, but she's currently 6 and still makes mistakes, very characteristic of a 6-year-old. So recently, in the last few months, she has a few different times decided to draw on her clothing. This first happened around the holidays, and she took a marker and she drew on her clothes. And of course, when I saw it, I was quite upset. And what were you thinking? Why did you draw on your clothes? And she got very upset. And then she said, well, but these don't fit me anymore. I won't have them next year at Christmas time. And so I didn't think it mattered. And then I explained, well, then we can't donate it, et cetera, et cetera. She said, well, Mama, I did it with washable marker. Turns out she was right. Fully washable. Thank you, Crayola. And it did end up coming out. So in her mind, that was a win, right? It didn't end up being a problem. So fast forward a few weeks and she's in my office. She's sitting up on my desk and we're talking, and I look down at her legs and she has once again drawn on her clothing. And I was admittedly, like, my first response was to be pretty upset, but I caught myself very quickly, calmed down, and she and I were talking about it, but she was very remorseful. She, felt bad. She knew she wasn't supposed to. And my husband walked in during that conversation. And so we were both sitting with her, and I had my hand on her leg as we were talking about it. And my husband sort of naturally then put his hand on her leg as well. And as we were talking through this, at some point, she was upset. We were talking about, listening to mommy and daddy and not destroying her things and whatever the, problem solving conversation that we were having. And at one point during that, my husband took his hand away from her leg. And I don't even think that she realized what she was doing. But she immediately reached out, snatched his hand back, and placed it back on her leg. So that once again, we both had our hands on her legs. And it was a way of staying, for her, connected and grounded with her place of safety, right? She, even in the midst of this upset, even in the midst of us being upset with her actions, we were still her place of safety, so much so that when my husband inadvertently and unintentionally removed that physical reminder of her safety, she grabbed back for it. That is what it means, I think, for a child to feel safe. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is seen. What does it mean for a child to feel seen? In a nutshell, it means for them to know that we care about them and that we pay attention to them. But I think it goes a little bit deeper than this, and Dr. Siegel and Dr. Bryson talk about this. It goes to making sure that we are tuning in to their mental state in any given moment, but also looking to really understand what's going on underneath the surface for them. Who are they? What do they believe? What do they think? What do they feel? And when they're misbehaving, why? If you've worked with me at all or been a part of the academy, you know that we talk a lot about the belief behind the behavior. This is a really key component of positive discipline, and that is really looking to understand not just what we see on the surface, behavior-wise or emotion-wise, but what is the belief underneath that behavior or that emotion? What's going on underneath the surface for them? And then, as a part of this feeling seen, are we responding to that? Are we acknowledging it? Are we leaning into that? That is more the core of a child feeling seen, or how we help them feel seen. It means that we step away from lecturing. That is hard, right? That's really hard. When we feel like we know best, we are wiser, we've been around longer, we know what they should do, we know what they could do, we know where they got it wrong. But when we step out of that lecturing space, if we step out of the talking at them, and we work to understand, to talk with, to connect, to validate their emotions, to recognize their emotions rather than shaming them, that is where a child feels seen. So I'm going to tell you another story. So my older child, who you all know is now 14, middle school was rough for us. Unbeknownst to any of us at the time, she had ADHD and was undiagnosed. She started middle school in the pandemic. She went to a different school than all of her elementary friends went to. So she felt really displaced socially, and the academics were very challenging. When you put all of those things together, you had a kid who was feeling very frustrated, very alone. It was really, really difficult. And because we were in the midst of a pandemic, because we were in the midst of all of our own baggage, again, right, we're dealing with our own shit, the way that that was perceived by my husband and me, because we didn't look to get underneath the surface, was a kid who didn't care, was unengaged, didn't give, two you know what about school and was just lazy and unmotivated. Frankly, those are words that crossed my brain. She was smart, but she wasn't motivated. Why did my husband and I leap to those conclusions? Because we didn't make an effort to see and to understand what was going on under the surface as well as we should have. And once we put in that effort, once we both, as I said, dealt with our own shit and realized what was going on, that we really needed to get and figure out what was going on more. When we did that, we were able to see that there was a deeper issue here. We had a kid who, as I said, felt socially isolated, who was dealing with a neurodiversity, right? She was ADHD and struggling because she wasn't getting support for that. And in fact, she cared deeply about her school work, but was getting so overwhelmed that she was shutting down. Overwhelm leading to shutdown is a very different story. It's a very different narrative than lazy and unmotivated. It opened us up to providing her with more support and connecting with her on a deeper level. And we ended up with a kid who I think would tell you feels at this point pretty deeply seen and understood, as well as any adolescent would ever admit that, right? But pretty deeply understood and seen on a number of different levels and is thriving because of it. I would no longer describe this kid as unmotivated or lazy. Those words would not even cross my lips because I've seen the way that seeing her supported her. We have to remember that it is always easier. It's super easy for us to label them with negative labels. We have to remember that it's actually easier for them to get along and do well. Every child out there would prefer to get along and do well. And if they are not able to do that, we have to start asking why, right? That's the seen part of being seen. We got to get curious. We really have to become observers and leave space for conversation rather than telling, right? There's a difference between telling and talking. Okay, number 3. Soothed. Let's talk about what it means to be soothed. So again, at its core, soothed means that our children know and believe on a deep level we will be there for them when they are hurting. It means they believe we've got their back, right? It means that we have the ability to sort of understand what might be going on and what might go on before it actually takes place. Right? We see and we understand them before something escalates. And we're able to soothe them proactively sometimes, right? Part of soothing a child, of course, is soothing them when they're dysregulated. But when we lead the soothing with seeing our children, then we have the ability to proactively soothe them. To know, for example, here, I'm going to give you another little story. So my younger daughter on Wednesdays right now, while we are without childcare, goes over to a friend's house and has a play date with her daughter, who's a little bit older than Marin. And so it feels super special because Marin, my daughter, idolizes Molly, this other kiddo. And so having a play date at Molly's house, super fun and super exciting. And yesterday, I knew that she wasn't going to be able to have that play date. And I knew that that was going to create some really big feelings. And so I was able, again, knowing her well and seeing her and seeing where some of those big feelings come from for her, enabled me to approach that disappointment in a way that was proactively soothing. Now, did she still have some big feelings that I needed to soothe in the moment? Yes. But I was able to get ahead of it, right? And so when we can get ahead of things and then also deal with them in the moment, that is the essence of soothing. I want to give you another example, and this comes from the book. When our kids get really upset, when they get really overwhelmed. So remember, I talked about my daughter being really overwhelmed and sort of shutting down. If we go in with the attitude of, if you get overwhelmed and then your emotions erupt and you get out of control, that I'm going to punish you, that's not soothing. And too often we go to punishment and consequences when feelings are what need to be dealt with. If instead we approach things from if you get overwhelmed and out of control, I will help you, and together we will get back to calm. That's the essence of soothing, right? That's the essence of soothing. So when we follow emotions and we follow overwhelm and we follow out of control behavior with punishment, we're not soothing. We're not seeing, we're not soothing, and we're probably not making our children feel safe, depending on how we approach that. But when we come at it from I've got you, I see that you're really upset, or I see that you're really overwhelmed, or I see that you're really out of control. We can still set boundaries in there, right? I can't let you hit, I can't let you kick. But when we see that and we soothe it in the moment or proactively and reassure our children that they know, so that they know we will always help them get back to calm, and then we can problem solve whatever it is that happened. That is the essence of soothing. Like I said, it doesn't mean we don't set boundaries. Coupled with that, it also doesn't mean that we give in to whatever demands come up for them, right? When we give in to demands in the midst of an emotional breakdown or emotional meltdown, we are teaching them to melt down to get what they want. That's not helpful to anybody. But when we soothe them through the disappointment, through the overwhelm, that is helpful. And that is a really critical piece of all of this. When we soothe them, we are joining them in dealing with the problem rather than putting the problem between them and us so that we are fighting it, right? And when we consistently soothe our kids, when we show up for them in that way, I think some parents worry that makes their kids soft. It actually has the opposite impact. And first of all, I want to just say, what the heck is wrong with soft, right? Yes, we want our kids to have resilience and perseverance and to be able to sort of, make it through difficult situations. But I think a child who is soft around the edges emotionally has a lot of hidden strength. So I'm going to rephrase that word that I used. But when we're consistently showing up and soothing our kids, we are teaching them the skill of self-soothing. We're not making them weak. We're not stripping them of resilience. We're not stripping them of motivation or perseverance or the ability to handle their lives. We're actually bolstering those things because we are giving them and teaching them how to self-soothe when we soothe them. Soothing and coddling are not the same thing. They just aren't. So we can do this in a number of ways. We can create, some of you, again, who've worked with me or are part of the academy have heard me talk about the calm down space, calm down kits, right? We can create ways for them to calm down with the space and the objects around them. We can also offer what Dr. Bryson and Dr. Siegel call our peace, which means our presence, our engagement, our affection, our calmness, and our empathy. Peace. We can show up when they are at their worst. They're at their worst and we show up. That is the essence of soothing. Okay. We're going to touch on the final S, which is secure. We help our children feel secure. And really, security comes into play when the first three are already well in place. And secure really means that our children trust us to help them feel at home in the world and then learn to help themselves feel safe, seen, and soothed, right? So when we show up and help them feel safe, seen, soothed, and create a sense of security where they can trust us and they can trust the world and help them feel at home in the world, that's how they learn to feel safe, seen, and soothed in themselves. Helping a child feel secure means we set boundaries. We set boundaries, but we do it while communicating love. We're validating their feelings. We're communicating that we understand them, but we're still setting those boundaries. I was working with a client earlier this week whose child was feeling really dysregulated at night and started punching the pillow, right? While this parent was lying down next to them. And this parent said, it's okay if you punch your pillow, but don't punch close to me because you're going to hit me. And what happened? The child sort of pushed that boundary, punched closer and closer to this parent's face and ended up actually hitting this parent. And so what we talked about was that was a great start, but we could set that boundary even more clearly by saying, wow, it looks like you're really overwhelmed or really frustrated or really angry right now, and that you're getting that anger out by punching the pillow. And that's okay. And I cannot allow you to hit me. So I'm going to step outside, or I'm going to sit over here in this chair over here. I'm here for you, but I'm going to step away while you punch the pillow so that I don't get hurt, right? We can set really clear and loving boundaries. And in that, it's not that we're removing our affection from them, but we're saying, hey, I see you. I see that you're upset. That's okay. And the way that you're solving that right now is also okay, assuming that it is. But I'm not going to allow myself to get hurt because that's not okay, right? So we really can sort of help our children feel secure by setting clear and loving boundaries without shame. We can still validate them. We can do it with kindness. And in positive discipline, we talk about balancing firm and kind at the same time. And that's, that we can do for them. When we provide security to our children, and this comes directly from the book, we provide an understanding of the importance of relationships. We provide independence and objectivity in the context of connection to others. We help our children build resilience in the face of stress. We help our children learn to regulate their emotions and their bodies. We teach our children flexibility and adaptability. We model and teach empathy. And we provide our children, we start teaching them to develop their own personal insight and the capacity to develop a really rich inner life and to understand themselves, to make themselves feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure. That's what security means. So just as a recap, as I just said them, the 4 S's are safe, seen, soothed, and secure. Safe is we protect them and shelter them from harm, either from the outside world or from us. Seen is we make an effort to understand what's going on below the surface so that they know we care about them and pay attention to what's going on with them. Soothed, they know on a deep, deep level that we will be there when they are hurting. And secure, they trust us to help them feel at home in the world so they can learn to help themselves feel safe, seen, soothed, and ultimately secure. I think this is a really beautiful way of thinking about our job as parents. And just to circle back all the way to the beginning, we can't do these 4 things if we're not taking care of ourselves, both from a self-care standpoint, but also just dealing with our own baggage, managing our own triggers, dealing with our own shit. That's how we show up in all the ways that our kids need us to, so that we can get all those awesome benefits of, kids who are thriving socially, emotionally, cognitively, academically, etc., etc. All right. That's all I have for you today. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has sort of opened some ideas or some thoughts about ways that we can be the best parents we can be and support our kids. If any of these are feeling really difficult for you, really challenging, and you don't know quite how to get there, you don't know how to manage your own stuff, how to stay calm, how to parent well with empathy, how to shut up and listen, right? Please reach out. I provide support to parents every day in a bunch of different ways. Let's talk. I'm here. On that note, I wish you happy parenting. I'll see you in February. Take care.